Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. For those who joining us for the first time, my name is Alina Bonadonna, and I'm super delighted to be your moderator today. And thanks to everyone who already reacted to our poll, because it's super important for us to know from where you are listening to us currently, because today we have the distinct pleasure to host Sonia Andre, who will share with us the most important principles about HACCP. How are you, Sonia?
I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm perfect. And until we are still fulfilling our poll, also, guys, can you please drop us a reaction to make sure that you hear us well, see us well, so we can start our yes, reactions are coming. And where are your hearts? I don't see your hearts. Yes. Brilliant, beautiful. Oh, so many hearts for such charming lady we are hosting today. And yeah, and as always, a huge thanks to Nemis Technologies for supporting such young but super powerful educational project as our academy. So, Sonia, as you can see here, we have quite diverse list of attendees from UK and US mainly, and also some people from Europe. And I will give you now a word to explain more what we will learn today. And then, as soon as you are ready, I will disappear and you are free to start.
Thank you, Alina. So, hello everybody. So, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm very happy to be here today, invited by Nemis Academy, and we are taking you really back to the basics. I know Nemis Academy offers a lot of very advanced webinars, new technologies, and all these things for food safety, but we felt actually let's go back to the beginning. HACCP is a legal requirement in many countries. Let's talk about that. So that's the topic today, and we'll be very focused on UK and EU legislation, hence why we're asking you just to confirm where you're coming from.
Perfect. So I entered the poll. I think we got enough data for the beginning, right? And now you should be able to share your slides, and then I will kind of disappear, but will always spy on you.
Okay, no worries. So you should be able to see my screen.
Yes, all
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah.
back to basics, HACCP and the law. Um, so yeah, like I just said, we're going back to the legal side of things. So today, unfortunately, we won't have time to discuss how to put in place a good, robust HACCP. We're not going in depth on PRPs or food safety culture. This is not the topic, and there's no time as well. We're talking about how HACCP and the law are related. And if you want to know more, obviously we can well, we do training, so you can do that, or we can have discussions after the webinars. So HACCP was first developed in the 1960s in the US. It was developed for the NASA, by the NASA, as well as a food business in the US called the Pillsbury Company, and with the help also of the US Army laboratories. The NASA, you might be thinking, why? Well, they wanted to make sure that the food they would send with the astronauts on space missions would be safe and would not cause for any astronauts to fall ill or be injured, because then it would be very complicated while you're in space. So that is how it all originated. That's how it all started. The acronym HACCP means hazard analysis and critical control points. So again, not going into the detailed definition of CCPs, etc., but critical control points relates to steps in the process of a food business where there are significant hazards, food safety hazards that have been identified, and where if the business doesn't put in place some very robust control measures at that point, they can't say, yeah, our food is safe, we can release happily the product on the market. They cannot be 100% sure. So that's why we call them critical control points, but they're effectively process steps where control is absolutely required. So HACCP is a science-based tool. So it's a methodology. HACCP is a methodology, a risk assessment methodology. It's particular in that it's very systematic. If in training on HACCP, I often say, think of a double entry matrix when you're doing your HACCP. You've got all your process steps and you've got all the hazard categories and you're going to cross-check one by one. So it can be very fastidious depending on the food organizations, very long process. But it's very systematic and it's a preventive approach to food safety. Think of the NASA origins. They wanted to make sure the food would be safe. So it wasn't a case of testing the foods once the astronauts are opening their packs. That's way too late. They wanted to have a very proactive approach to food safety. So HACCP is a methodology which is designed to identify the significant hazards in a food operation, evaluate the risk they actually represent. So hazard and risk not the same thing, as most of you may know. So you evaluate the significance of the risks for each relevant hazard you've identified, and then you put in place control measures to make sure that those hazards, you're controlling them. The end product, what you're releasing to the market, is not going to harm consumers. So science-based, remember, preventive and very systematic approach. So HACCP helps food business to proactively identify and control food safety risks. Yeah, again, I compare or I oppose with quality control or food safety testing. This is, we're being preventive when we're putting a HACCP in place. We want to prevent foodborne illnesses and foodborne injuries. So why do we do HACCP? Why is it really important to do HACCP? Just like we said, because we want to protect the consumers. We don't want them to fall ill or to be injured because of the food they've ingested. So we don't want them to be harmed by the food we're putting on the market. Also, as a food business, it's probably your first line of one of your first line of defense if you ever have to stand in a court of law to defend how you've produced the food because there's been an outbreak or something related to your business. It's your business protection. You need a good HACCP, and it will prevent, hopefully, if it's done correctly, diligently, food recalls, which can be very expensive, very disruptive, take a lot of resource. It will hopefully protect the business from reputational damage. So you may have seen in mainstream media when there's a big food recall, it can really hurt a brand. So you're protecting the business from that if you've got a good, robust HACCP. Fines, legal fees that come with those product recalls or those outbreaks. You may have to pay compensation for the people who have fallen ill after eating your food. Your business could be closed if you're found out you have done something really bad, if you're not capable of showing your or demonstrating due diligence. So HACCP is protecting your consumers, but also your own business. Yeah, we talk about due diligence. Another reason why we do HACCP, those of you who worked with food safety certification schemes like SALSA for small and medium businesses, or BRCGS, which is very renowned in the UK, FSSE 22000, IFS, SQF, you need HACCP or something, a food safety plan, let's say. So you cannot, this is often the second section in most of the standards after senior commitment management, without which we can't do anything. So HACCP is really, really important, and it's a cornerstone of the certification schemes. If you don't have a HACCP equivalent in place, you can't have your certification. So that's another reason why we do it, or maybe clients require a HACCP. And finally, and that's what we're focusing on today, you need a HACCP for legal compliance in many countries in the world. So in the UK, in the EU, and that's why we're asking where you're joining us from, it is absolutely required to have a procedure based on the principles of HACCP if you're a food business. There are many other countries in the world where HACCP is also a legal requirement. I couldn't tell you which countries do what exactly, forgive me, but I could research it if you have particular questions. I think Australia do something similar to the EU and the UK, but in the US, for example, I think it's only if you're in certain food sectors. Don't quote me, I would have to research it. This is really about EU and UK, the rest of the slides anyway. And the legislation that we are focusing on today is EC Reg 852 from 2004, which in its scope states very clearly, so everything in my slides that is in orange to help you see what's extracted almost directly from the legislation. So it says that food business operators carrying out any stage of production, processing, and distribution of food after primary production is concerned by this legislation. And this legislation, this regulation establishes the general rules. Again, this is quoted directly from the text. General rules for food business operators on the hygiene of foodstuffs. Initially it's a European regulation, but it's been retained after Brexit, so it still applies to the UK. So very important to understand, if you're a food business in the UK or in the EU and you're not a primary producer, you need to have a procedure, they say in the law. You need to have a system based on the HACCP principles to ensure food safety in your business. It's a legal requirement. So it still happens to me sometimes. I talk with a small transport company or a small depot and handling foods, and they don't realize they have to have a HACCP in place. So it's not a case of I'm not making the food, so then I don't need a HACCP. You do by law. If you are if you're working with food as a business, you need to have a HACCP in place with nuances that we're going to cover in a minute. Within EC Reg 852, actually, let me just copy some links. Alina said I was able to talk to you in the chat. For those of you who don't know these regulations, this is the UK version, and this is the EU one. There's a difference because there's a few paragraphs that have been added in March 2021 after Brexit. I'll come back to that. So this regulation, which I just put in the chat, Alina, do tell me if it didn't come through. We can reshare in another way.
All fine.
So those of you who work in food safety regularly, you must have heard of the famous Article 5. So in the second chapter of the regulation, in Article 5, it is where you can read literally that food business operators shall put in place, implement, and maintain a permanent procedures based on the HACCP principles. And it goes on to list the principles. I'll show you in the next slide in a minute. This obligation, this legal obligation, is being enforced and verified by the local authorities, different systems in different countries. But yeah, the food safety authorities carry out inspections to make sure you're complying with this requirement. The EC Reg 852 then goes on following this previous statement, it goes on to list the principles of HACCP. So those who are familiar with the Codex HACCP or maybe online with us today, if you read my slide, you may see some slight difference because Codex has been updated since the regulation came out, but you also recognize clearly the 7 principles. So I'll read them out so everybody's heard them once. So the first line is identifying any hazards, so food safety hazards, that must be prevented, eliminated, or reduced to acceptable levels. Acceptable levels can mean something very different from one operation to another. It depends what kind of products you are handling, if they're ready to eat, if they're not ready to eat. We talk about high risk, high care, low risk. So acceptable levels is not set in stone. It's something the business has to define precisely. The second line is identifying the critical control points at the steps at which control is essential. Yeah, I was explaining about the CCPs very briefly earlier. To prevent or eliminate or reduce the risks to an acceptable level. It goes on to say establishing critical limits at critical control points, which separate acceptability from unacceptability. So think safe for sure or not quite sure, safe or unsafe. and again, for the prevention, elimination, or reduction of the identified hazards. The fourth one is that as a food business, you must establish and implement effective monitoring procedures for each CCP you've identified. And in case there is a deviation from the critical limits where you're monitoring those CCPs, you need to have a bit of a plan. So you need to put in place corrective actions and record everything, which is the last point. Establishing procedures will be carried regularly to verify that the measures previously listed are working effectively. And the last point is that you need to establish documents and records commensurate with the nature and size of the food business. Sorry, this is probably very boring, but it is the law. Yeah, this is the 7 principles of HACCP. They very much look like the current Codex document, and it's not a coincidence. So we'll talk about Codex in a minute. So again, this is a copy-paste of what you find in Article 5 if you check the regulation EC Reg 852. So Codex, what's Codex? I've mentioned Codex a few times. So Codex Alimentarius is a collection of reference documents internationally recognized all around quality and food safety. Which probably the most famous is the General Principles of Food Hygiene, and that's where you find the best practice advice from Codex to apply HACCP. So I can also send you a link. I was already on the 12 logical steps. Let's just stick that there. That's the latest edition from 2023.
Yeah. Sonia, 1 second. Until you are sending link, just a question to all attendees. Do you see slides properly, or anyone experience some difficulties? Because I just got a question from one attendee that there is a green screen. Yeah, so all fine with slides. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so
much. Thanks for that, Anina. So Codex, what does Codex come into the picture? I'll explain in the next slide. The regulation is important to know. Some of you might work in very small businesses and you're listening to me and you're almost having a panic attack. I need to do all these things. But actually the law and Codex as well itself, the General Principles of Food Hygiene, they allow for some flexibility for small businesses. So in the UK, you still need to have records. You still need to be able to prove what you're doing through written records, but you can have, you can use some guides or some tools that are based on the HACCP principles, but where you're not required to develop a full Monty HACCP, as I often say. So this is what we use in the UK. For example, the FSA, we're very fortunate, has developed a series of guides to help small businesses comply with the law without necessarily being full-on involved in all the jargon that we use in food safety. So I can also share a link. So this is for the UK. You would have to check what's in your country. Hopefully you have something equivalent. But in the UK, if you use one of those guides, there's one for caterers, small retailers, childminders, residential care homes. There's even a little bit of training material here for was designed initially for colleges. If you put in place the guide, if you follow, it's very simple. They talk about safe methods. Again, there's no jargon that you won't even find apart from the introduction, the word HACCP in the document. It's very well done, very easy to understand. And so long as you follow the safe methods and you fill the documents they're asking you to fill, you are effectively compliant with the legal requirements when it comes to HACCP and food safety. So this is good to know. And again, if you're not in the UK, if you're joining us from a different country, have a look, because you may have something equivalent. There is also something that the FSA proposes to support small businesses, which is a software, My HACCP. If you look, I didn't prepare that one, but if you Google FSA, My HACCP, and it's an application that helps you to develop your HACCP. So going back to Codex, in the Codex General Principles of Food Hygiene, so this is the last edition on my slides, nice pretty blue instead of being the traditional black and white document. It describes a sequence, a logic sequence of 12 steps is here, which we call the 12 logical steps, which consist of 5 preparation steps and those 7 principles of HACCP that we've been talking about. So the 5 pre-steps and the 7 principles make 12 logical steps. Now, it's important to understand that the 7 principles of HACCP is what's legally required, not the 5 pre-steps. However, if you've been involved in developing HACCP, you know that without doing the first 5 steps, it's a lot harder to do a good job. If you're not really clarifying the scope, if you don't have a clear team to work on these topics, if you haven't done a process flow diagram, etc., it's a lot harder to do a good HACCP plan. So here they are. So the 5 pre-steps, the team describing the product, identifying who's going to be consuming your products, very important. You may be targeting vulnerable populations, as we say, or people suffering from food allergies with free-from products, etc. So it's really important to identify who is going to eat your products or drink your products, and then to have a visual representation of the process flow is also recommended. So these are the recommendations from Codex. Again, these 5 pre-steps are not required by law, but really, really strongly recommend that you start with that before you crack on with the 7 principles. The 7 principles are required by law or a procedure based on them. And I will not read them again because basically I have just read the legislation that quotes them. So you can see them on the slide. How am I doing with time, Alina? All good?
All perfect, all perfect.
Good. Okay. So in this EC Reg 852, we have a couple of areas that talk about training requirements. So it's important if you work with food to know that legally speaking, you need some training on HACCP. If you are responsible for developing or maintaining the HACCP or implementing the guides, like the examples I have just shown you, you need to have received adequate training in the application of the HACCP principles. And food handlers must be supervised or instructed and or trained on food hygiene matters. Now, that's what the law says. The law, fortunately or unfortunately, doesn't tell us to what level people need to be trained, who exactly needs training, how often to refresh. This is for the business to decide. You can find some guidance, industry best practice in various places, but really have to look at what your business is doing. The size of it, the type of products you're making, are they high risk, are they low risk, to decide what's appropriate. This is definitely not a legal requirement. I don't know if you can see my mouse actually, but yeah, no refresher frequency imposed, but obviously you need to keep people up to date and adequately trained on these topics. So one thing we are not doing today is going too much into the detail of PRPs, prerequisite programs. Prerequisite programs, and you can see underneath food safety culture, they really are the foundation to your food safety system. So if you don't have a decent food safety culture, if you have no prerequisites at all in the business and you're throwing yourself into developing a HACCP plan, it is not going to work. You need to have good, robust PRPs in place. So when I say PRPs, we mean cleaning, disinfection, maintenance, chemical control, pest control, waste management, all these basic things that when you're establishing yourself as a food business, you know you have to do these things, even if you know nothing about HACCP. So in EC Reg 852, it talks about HACCP, we've covered that, but it also lists a number of requirements to do with those PRPs. I didn't read them all, but yeah, temperature control, handling and storage, transport as well, if relevant, enough lavatories, enough wash stations, hand wash stations, staff hygiene, health rules, return to work rules, all these, there are some mentions in EC Reg 852, but it's not strictly speaking HACCP, because like I said, this is really the foundation to developing a good HACCP plan. Food safety culture, just a little note. So if you're looking at, I can't remember which one is which. If you're looking, oh, there you go. If you're looking at the EU version of EC 852, you will see that there's a chapter specifically about food safety culture. There's an obligation for food businesses to promote food safety culture. This came about in March 2021, I think. Don't quote me. And so that was after Brexit. So if you look at the same regulation, but the British version, which would be towards the end, it's not there. So it doesn't currently apply, like strictly legally speaking. It stops with training. So that's why I've indicated a little EU here. So food safety culture requirements, legal requirements, is specifically apply, if you are joining us from the EU, it's relevant. For the UK, food safety culture is always relevant, but what I mean is like it's not spelled out in this legal text. Common mistakes, errors, issues with HACCP. A HACCP plan that's too generic. You still see businesses are just very happy to copy paste from another business they've consulted. And so the HACCP plan is not specific to their site. The HACCP should always be site specific. So it's not specific enough, or the hazards have not been identified, again, specifically enough. So you're not covering some of the hazards that are relevant, or you're covering some hazards that have no relevance to your operation. So you can see straight away there's a lack of understanding of what HACCP is there for. You're trying to identify the significant hazards as in the first principle. So talking about hazards that have no relevance to your operation is not good. So that's a classic, unfortunately. Even sometimes you work with consultants, sadly. Poor record keeping is a classic as well, again, unfortunately. So you know the principle 7 that we read out, you must have documentation and records, in particular to prove that you're monitoring these CCPs that you've identified, that you're staying within the control limits. And it happens quite a lot that the record keeping is not up to the required level. So if, God forbid, you were to stand in a court of law having to defend the business and you're not able to present records that would be acceptable to the judge or whoever is taking care of your case, you have a problem. Remember, we said HACCP is one of your first line of defense, really your due diligence. So this record keeping is really, really important. Doing the monitoring and not recording as you go is not good enough. You need records that are authentic, that are done as you're doing the work. They're operational records. They need to be readable. They need to be correct, accurate, and done timely. So yeah, just be wary of that. That's often a problem. And the lack or the inadequacy of the level of training on HACCP. So people are in charge of HACCP, but actually they've never really had training on HACCP. This is not a very difficult one to address. So again, be aware it is written in the law that the people developing your HACCP plan or running it, maintaining it, they need to have training on the principles of HACCP. Best practice, keep things simple. Keep things real. Keep your HACCP to the point. There's no value in doing something overly complicated. At the end of the day, you're trying to achieve safe food. So stay pragmatic and focus on what's really happening and what the real hazards are. Assign clear responsibilities, clear communication channels, and train staff. If something doesn't seem right, your people need to feel empowered to say, I think this is not good, this is not safe enough, or I've identified a weakness there. They should feel, first they need to have the understanding, the awareness, so they need to be trained, but also they should feel they're allowed and they should raise the issue. Yeah, it goes hand in hand with the food safety culture we just briefly covered. And lastly, things change. Businesses want to try new things, a new product, get a new machine, new equipment, source from a new country. Just Remember to update your plans regularly. Do your horizon scanning. Make sure you're aware of what's going on in your industry. Update your plan to reflect operational changes and just things that happen in industry, emerging issues, etc. So reviewing and updating your plan is very important. And so just to conclude, HACCP is a legal requirement under EC Reg 852 from 2004, so that applies to the EU and the UK. There may be some nuances. It's important to find out about the national legislation. I thought I'd lost something there, so I was disappearing. Hopefully you can still see the slides. Yeah, there may be nuances for the HACCP legislation. Thank you, Céline. There may be some nuances depending on where you are, so make sure to find out about your national, potentially even regional regulations. So even more so those who are joining us from outside of the EU and the UK, hopefully this is raising a little bit of awareness, but do check what's legally required in your part of the world. Compliance and implementation of a good, diligent HACCP will protect your business and will protect your consumers. Yeah, we have a moral duty to put safe food on the market. It's not just a legal requirement. So a good HACCP will ensure food safety, due diligence. It will support the customer and the consumer trust. It will support your brand, really. And training and documentation are key to the success, to the compliant, they're legally required. Documentation, if you're working with operational teams, they may say sometimes, too much paperwork, this is only paperwork. So pass on the information, it's paperwork, but it's legally required paperwork, and it's for our business protection in case something goes wrong one day. It also is an important tool just to go back to what you've done, make sure that things are implemented the way you think that they are being done. So for your inspections, your audits, etc., it is absolutely crucial to have documentation in place. So stay informed, do your horizon scanning, review your HACCP plans, ensure your people are trained. Think of HACCP not just as a legal duty, but as a moral obligation, a tool to protect your customers, your consumers, your business reputation, as we were saying a second ago, to protect your brand. BRCGS got it right with the new acronym, is brand reputation is definitely one of the focuses. And that's it for me. I hope you found that interesting. Alina, I am done.
Thank you so much. And from the interaction today, I see that we have quite a lot of people. And using the opportunity, first of all, I want to thank Sonia for such amazing presentation. It was brilliant. And yeah, we see from the reactions a lot of hearts, as I asked from the beginning. Brilliant. So you have now a chance, guys, to ask a question. And me, in the meantime, I just want to ask Sonia to tell a bit more about the course we are planning to do in June.
Sure. So we are, if you would like to know more about HACCP and food safety, we're actually organizing a training together. Can I open the link, Alina?
Yeah, I just now dropped it onto the chat room. So yeah, well, you can open it now, yeah.
Yeah, it's a level 2 food safety and HACCP course. So it combines food safety and HACCP, which are strongly linked anyway, but more often than not, you will find training about food safety or training about HACCP. This is a one-day course where we're combining both. And we're taking you through a bit of an introduction. We are spending quite a bit of time on the prerequisite programs that I passed very briefly today because they are so important. They're really the foundation to your HACCP. You can't do good HACCP if your PRPs are not good. So we talk about that, we take examples, and then we cover the 12 logical steps of HACCP. We include the GFSI element, so it's not just the codex. We talk about BRCGS requirements and things like that as well. And there's a little exam, so you get a nice certificate.
I should say that I was also convinced to do this course because of working in such environment as well. Even though on the marketing side, I will do it as well. So guys, I encourage you as well to join and to do this fun day together within the same team. But we will have more possibility to talk because it will be Zoom, and everyone will have its own space to also interact a bit more than we are doing now.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind, Sonia, I will start first asking question because I see that our audience is a bit shy.
Okay, that's all right.
So, there are basically two questions. You mentioned already about the first step in developing a HACCP plan. Maybe you can repeat it again, and how often it should be revised as well.
How often it should be revised? There are requirements in certification schemes, but not in the law, to my knowledge. So in certification schemes, it often says that you have to review at least once a year. I believe it's not specified in the law, but you need to review always. If you have a change that could create or amplify a risk, you must review. You must make sure that your plan is still valid. Validation is a very important concept. The first principle, Alina, is this one, and it's made of 3 parts. So you list all the potential hazards. And when we say hazards, we're thinking food safety. So there'll be physical hazards. You think physical contaminants, a staple, a piece of metal, a piece of string, a piece of glass, broken glass, chemical hazards, and allergens. Sometimes allergens are kept together with chemicals, and the microbiological hazards. So your pathogens, bacteria, viruses. Viruses are often forgotten, but they're very, very important. So that's the beginning of the first principle. You identify all the potential hazards. You conduct a hazard analysis, so you're looking at the ones that can really happen and the conditions that could lead to them in your operation. So every operation is different. You're sourcing raw materials that are different. So you need to look at that. You have to consider the control measures that you have in place, your PRPs, because they will play a role in your risk assessment. So if you've got good PRPs in place, you will reduce the likelihood of a hazard actually materializing or causing big trouble. And yeah, and then I can talk about it for a half day, so I'll stop here.
Yeah, there is a question. Can cleaning chemicals be classified as hazard?
Yes, cleaning chemicals, if you're not controlling, if you're not, so I simplify, but if you're not locking away your chemicals, training people to handle the chemicals, using food grade chemicals in certain parts of the operation, things can go wrong. So yeah, it's absolutely an example of chemical hazard that you have to factor in. Yeah, if you don't rinse correctly after cleaning, you may have residues of cleaning chemicals on food contact surfaces. It's a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And also there is a question, do we need to risk assess at each step of flow diagram?
Yes, so you look at each key step. So the flow diagram is it's like a step ladder representation of your process flow, and you go step by step. You're thinking, are there any physical hazards that I need to think about? That any chemical hazards? So that's why we're saying the double entry matrix. Yeah, every step you need to think, can something go wrong? Yeah.
Thank you so much. And also answering my question, you mentioned about verification, but what's the difference between verification and validation of
That is
HACCP?
such a good question. Did you prepare that one? um, okay, a simple way to explain this: verification, you're looking back, you're looking at what's been done. Is it what I said my team should be doing? Are they implementing things correctly? Did it work? Is it working? You're looking at what's happened. That's verification. So your inspections, your audits, your swabs, that's verification. Validation, you're looking to the future. Is it going to work? The way I'm designing this procedure, this cleaning method, the way I'm designing my HACCP, is it going to work? Is it always going to work consistently? That's validation. So typically the way we validate things, we even have have to develop a protocol with tests involved, or we find in reputable literature the information that we need, scientifically based information. So validation, will it work? Verification, does it work? Did it work? Yeah.
Yeah, and primarily, who should be in this HACCP team? maybe like a lot of people know about me. I'm new here, so
Yes, so HACCP team. So again, each business has to look at their structure and what makes sense. But typically, you'll have technical people, QCs, operations absolutely need to be involved. Maintenance, things can go wrong with the equipment. So if you have maintenance people on site, you have them in. Potentially transport. It depends what you're doing on site. You have to think. Who can bring value to the discussion because things can go wrong with what they are responsible for. Sometimes you need your NPD people around the room because they're the first one to bring in new allergens on site. They don't say anything to anyone. So it depends. It depends. But a good mix, a multidisciplinary team is the best rather than just a compliance manager doing it on their own, which often happens.
yeah. And yeah, we got one more question here. Um, Hello, Alina. Hello, Eniko. And hello, Sonia. Also, could I have your view? What is the requirement for a food trading business in the UK without producing, handling, storing food?
Same. If you're a registered food business, you must put in place a food safety system that is based on the HACCP principles. So it doesn't matter if you're not making the food. If you're a small transport company or a small distribution company, or you just do storage of food products, you need to have a HACCP. It will be more simple than a big manufacturing site that makes high-risk products, but you need to have something. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And maybe as a summary of our today webinar, and hopefully lecture in the future, can you summarize the difference between hazard and risk?
Yes. So a hazard is anything that has the potential to cause harm, but actually it might not because it's not likely to happen. And that's the risk. The risk takes into account the severity, the potential severity of a hazard, but also its real chances of occurring. I often take the example of, say, a shark. So this is health and safety, not food safety, but to illustrate a shark versus a kitten. I see some names on the list of people that have been in training with me. They must be giggling away. It's always the same example, but it's really explicit. So if you have a shark, you're thinking, oh my God, this is definitely more high risk than a kitten. Actually, for most of us who don't work at SeaWorld or who don't come across sharks, kittens are more likely to hurt you one day because they'll claw you. They're very sharp claws. So you have to think of the exposure to the hazard, not just the hazard alone. You have to think of the likelihood of coming across. Does that make sense?
Definitely, 100%. And thank you so much, Sonia, for being with us today. I do expect to receive again the huge wave of appreciation from our lovely audience. And thank you, everyone, for staying until now with us. We hope to see you in our course with Sonia, and we hope to see you already in 2 weeks in our next webinar, where we will talk about food safety risks, specifically for US, especially in current not easy time. So just stay tuned, and I always super grateful to see you all guys to join every webinar session with our so cool and so valuable experts. Have a nice day to everyone who is still on the daytime. Those who are at the end of the day, have a nice evening and lovely Friday tomorrow. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.